The waiter places the bill in the center of the table. The restaurant is quiet. A small family talks softly in the corner. Cutlery clinks against plates. Rain taps gently against the windows overlooking the street. Across from you, your girlfriend reaches for the bill before you do. "I'll get it." She says it casually, like she always does, because as far as she knows, money is still tight. As far as she knows, you're still the guy driving a 12-year-old Honda with a dent in the rear bumper, the guy who checks prices before ordering, the guy who still buys supermarket coffee instead of the expensive stuff, the guy who sometimes jokes about being broke. You smile and let her grab the receipt. Then your phone vibrates. A notification appears on the screen. You glance down. Portfolio value, $3,801,247. For a moment, the number feels disconnected from reality. $3.8 million. More money than anyone sitting in this restaurant could possibly imagine you have. Your girlfriend doesn't notice. She is busy looking over the bill. The waiter doesn't notice. The people around you don't notice. Nobody ever does, because you've spent years making sure they don't. You slide the phone back into your pocket. Outside, cars crawl through the wet streets beneath the orange glow of streetlights. Inside, everything feels normal. That's the strange thing about becoming wealthy. Most people imagine some dramatic transformation. A mansion, luxury cars, private jets, constant excitement. Instead, you find yourself sitting in the same kind of restaurant you've always eaten in, wearing the same style of clothes, living a life that looks almost identical from the outside. The only difference is that nobody knows what sits quietly inside your bank account. Not your friends, not your family, not even the woman sitting across from you, especially not her. Because before the money arrived, there was a version of you she knew first. The version that slept on borrowed couches. The version working late shifts at McDonald's. The version counting coins before buying fuel. The version that couldn't afford the necklace she once stopped to admire in a jewelry store window. You still remember that day. The two of you were walking through the shopping center. She paused for only a second, long enough to look at the necklace, not long enough to ask for it. She smiled and kept walking. But you saw the price tag, and you immediately knew you couldn't afford it. Not even close. You laughed it off at the time, made some joke about becoming rich one day. But later that night, lying awake on your friend's couch, that necklace stayed in your mind. Not because of the jewelry, because of what it represented. You were 27 years old, working a job you hated, failing classes you barely cared about, living a life that felt temporary. Every morning felt like you were waking up inside somebody else's future. You watched successful people online, business owners, investors, entrepreneurs, people who seemed to move through life with certainty, and you constantly asked yourself the same question. What do they know that you don't? You weren't lazy. You weren't afraid of hard work. You were afraid of spending years climbing the wrong ladder, afraid of waking up 10 years later in exactly the same place, afraid that this feeling would never leave. That feeling of knowing you're capable of more while having absolutely no idea how to get there. Most people watching your life back then would have assumed nothing was about to change. Honestly, you would have assumed the same thing. Because when the opportunity finally appeared, it didn't look like an opportunity at all. It looked like an old vending machine sitting in the corner of a dusty warehouse. And somehow, that forgotten machine would change everything. The paint was scratched. The card reader looked ancient. Half the buttons were worn smooth from years of use. Most people would have ignored it. You couldn't stop looking at it. A few days later, while standing behind the counter at McDonald's, you found yourself thinking about that machine again. Not because it was impressive, because it represented something unfamiliar. Every dollar you'd ever earned came from your own time. You worked, you got paid, you stopped working. The money stopped too. The vending machine felt different. Eventually, curiosity won. You bought it. Almost all your savings disappeared. The reality was less exciting than the dream. The machine needed repairs. The refrigeration unit struggled. The card reader constantly failed. You spent evenings watching repair videos and weekends scrubbing years of dirt from the shelves. Your girlfriend thought the whole thing sounded ridiculous. Honestly, so did you. For weeks, almost nothing happened. A few sales, a few dollars, barely enough to notice. Then a local factory agreed to place the machine inside their employee break room. Hundreds of workers passed through every day. You stocked the machine on a Sunday evening. The next morning, half the inventory was gone. For the first time, money had arrived while you were sleeping. Not much, but enough to feel different. Enough to make you pay attention. The profits weren't life-changing, but they were real. Every week, the machine produced a little more, and instead of spending it, you left it alone. The money accumulated slowly. Months passed. Then, eventually, there was enough to buy a second machine. The first machine had purchased the second. That realization stayed with you, because it felt like watching something come alive. The business model itself was surprisingly simple. One machine might generate around $300 in weekly sales. After inventory costs, transaction fees, maintenance, and commissions paid to the location owner, perhaps $80 remained as profit. That remaining money is known as cash flow. Most people spend cash flow. You didn't. The profit accumulated until there was enough capital to purchase another machine. Now, two assets generated income instead of one. The return on investment, often called ROI, wasn't dramatic. It was gradual. The original asset continued producing cash long after the purchase had been made. As additional machines were added, the income increased. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8. Each machine carried risks. Poor locations, mechanical failures, stolen inventory, unexpected repair costs. Some machines barely earned anything. Others performed far better than expected. The growth wasn't exciting. It was repetitive. And because it was repetitive, it became scalable. Over time, the income from one asset funded another, creating a network that slowly expanded without requiring large amounts of outside capital. From the outside, nothing looked different. But beneath the surface, a system was being built. Back in your life, the months turned into years. You learned which locations worked, which products sold fastest, which machines constantly caused problems. Every mistake cost money. Every lesson improved the business. There were moments you wanted to quit. Machines broke down at the worst possible times. Locations closed unexpectedly. Entire weekends disappeared into maintenance and restocking routes. But little by little, the numbers kept moving upward. Not fast enough to impress anyone, just fast enough to matter. The strange part was that nobody noticed. Your friends still thought you worked at McDonald's. Your family still assumed you were struggling. Your girlfriend still saw the same man she'd always known. The old Honda remained parked outside. Your clothes didn't change. Your routine didn't change. Only the numbers changed. One rainy evening, you sat alone in your apartment reviewing sales reports on your laptop. The room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. You refreshed the spreadsheet, then stared at the screen. The vending machines had earned more that month than your full-time job. You checked the figures again, then again. The numbers didn't change. For years, you'd imagined what freedom might look like. You expected some dramatic moment, some overwhelming feeling. Instead, it arrived in complete silence. A laptop screen, a small apartment, rain tapping against the window, and a realization. The life you'd been building in secret was finally becoming larger than the life everyone else could see. The next morning, you drove to work. The Honda rattled slightly at a red light like it always did. The building looked exactly the same. But for the first time since you started working there, you walked through the doors knowing you wouldn't be there forever. You were already standing on the other side. You just hadn't told anyone yet. The strange thing about becoming wealthy is how ordinary it feels. Most people imagine some dramatic transformation. A mansion, a supercar, a life filled with luxury. Instead, years later, you're still driving the same Honda. The dent is still there. The air conditioning only works when it feels like it. And every morning, it starts with the same familiar rattle. You could replace it tomorrow, you just never do. The same thing happens with almost everything else. You still buy supermarket coffee. You still compare prices. You still hesitate before spending money on yourself. Because somewhere in the back of your mind, the version of you sleeping on borrowed couches never completely disappears. The vending machines continue growing, not because you're chasing more money, because momentum is difficult to stop. What started as a single machine becomes dozens, then hundreds. The business expands into neighboring cities, warehouses, factories, hospitals, office buildings. Every month, reports arrive, showing numbers that would have once seemed impossible. Yet your daily life barely changes. That's intentional. You never wanted people to treat you differently. Money has a strange effect on relationships. You notice it happened to other people. Suddenly, every conversation becomes a business idea. Every phone call becomes a favor. Every distant relative becomes interested in reconnecting. You decide long ago that privacy is worth more than attention, so you tell nobody. Not your friends, not your family, not even your girlfriend, especially not her. Because she's been there since before any of this existed, before the machines, before the money, before the opportunities. She knew the version of you that had nothing, and you need to know that version was enough. Years pass. One evening, you're sitting across from her at the same restaurant where this story began. Rain taps softly against the windows. The warm glow of hanging lights reflects across polished wooden tables. The waiter places the bill between you, just like always. Without hesitation, she reaches for it. "I've got it." You smile, just like always. For a moment, you look at her, really look at her. The woman who never asked how much money you had. The woman who stayed when there wasn't any. The woman who never stopped believing you would figure things out, even when you didn't believe it yourself. You think about the necklace, the one from years ago, the jewelry store window, the price tag you couldn't afford, the night you spent staring at the ceiling thinking about everything you weren't. She probably doesn't even remember it anymore, but you do. The waiter returns. This time, you take the bill. Your girlfriend raises an eyebrow. "You sure?" You nod. "Yeah." Outside, the rain has started falling harder. Cars pass through the reflections of streetlights on wet pavement. The city feels exactly the same, but something inside you finally feels ready. After dinner, the two of you walk through the shopping center, past familiar stores, past bright displays, past crowds of strangers moving through the evening. Then you stop, in front of the same jewelry store. Your girlfriend looks confused. You step inside. A few minutes later, the salesperson places a small black box onto the counter. The necklace catches the light immediately. Elegant, simple, exactly as you remember. Your girlfriend stares at it, then at you, then back at the necklace. "What is this?" You open the box and gently place it in her hands. For a moment, she doesn't speak. The noise of the shopping center seems to disappear. "You remember?" she finally whispers. You smile. "Of course I remember." She looks down at the necklace again, then back at you. The questions begin forming behind her eyes. Questions about money, about work, about how. But none of them matter right now. Because this moment was never about becoming a millionaire. It was never about the portfolio, the businesses, the bank accounts, or the number on your phone screen. It was about being able to keep a promise nobody else knew you made. The rain continues outside. People pass by without noticing. And for the first time in years, carrying the secret feels unnecessary. You stand beside the woman who was there before everything changed. And together, you walk back into the night, not richer, just complete.